Hello. I think we're live. Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm here today to talk to you about how to become an ally for people of color, or POC. We'll wait a few minutes for everybody to hop on. I'm gonna do some technology swapping here. I've got my phone going so I can see comments, because to be able to do the split screen, I can't see Facebook right now. So thank you for jumping on if you're here. Just go back to Facebook real quick and see. Okay, we got 3 people watching. Hello, 3 people. Bear with me. This is my first time doing this in this format. I don't want to jump in and just start talking about everything until everybody's here. So, should have some music going or something in the background. I don't know why I can't see my own live. You would think I could see my own live on Facebook. I'm trying to get it here so I can see the comments. Here we go. There we go. Okay. I can't see my own live. All right, we got 7 people watching. Cool. Okay. Good enough. I'm glad you're here. I hope more people will jump on as we get rolling here. I am here today to share with you information that I compiled in 2017 for my master's degree. I have had this workshop in my back pocket since then. I wanted to do a class on it, and it just never really came to fruition. And to be perfectly honest, I've been scared. I have been scared to share this. And I've been scared to share it because I was afraid I was going to alienate people. I was afraid I was going to bring up those tough conversations that people don't want to talk about. And I was afraid. I was making it about me. And I think that I'm not the only one that's guilty of that. I keep seeing over and over this quote of being silent is just as bad as being the oppressor. So I'm not going to be silent anymore. So I'm going to share with you this course that I put together. Now, it was originally made to be a 4-hour course in a classroom setting for faculty members to help them understand what white privilege is and how to become better educators and eliminate any bias they may have. So what I've done today is I've condensed it down and made it specifically, I've taken my PowerPoint slides and made it for today, and I've tried to kind of put it together to be a little easier to digest in a Facebook setting. It'll be about an hour long, so feel free to come back to it later, whatever, but I do have an interactive portion set up where I want you guys to comment and share, and there's a quiz, and there's all kinds of things. So I'm here to teach you about white privilege and about microaggressions and about how to become a better ally for people of color. So here's where we're going to start. So there's a lot of injustice in the world. It is awful right now. There are protests, there are riots. George Floyd was killed by a police officer, and it's horrific. And I think everybody watching can agree. It was murder. It was cold-blooded murder. And part of the reason for the riots is that people want justice. They're not being listened to. So this is all because of the system in place. And I'm going to stop ad-libbing, and I'm going to go back to my notes so I don't get off topic. I can squirrel brain like crazy. I'll just like and talk and talk and talk. So Black men and women are oppressed and profiled and being killed. Black lives matter. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. I've seen it everywhere. I posted a picture last night. Black Lives Matter. And in response to that, I've gotten a couple, well, all lives matter from a few people. And the first thing, before I even jump into the class, that I really need to address with you, if you're watching this and if you want to become an ally, this is tough love time. You have to stop saying all lives matter. And the reason for that, if there are 100 houses and there's one house on fire, where does the fire department go? To the one house. That house matters because that house is under attack by fire, right? Saying all lives matter is like being in one of the other 99 houses and being like, well, my house matters too. That's not what this is. Right now, Black men and women are being oppressed. and Black Lives Matter. That's the movement. If you want to be an ally, you need to start wrapping your head around that a little bit and get away from the all lives matter. Because do all lives matter? Of course they all matter. My goodness, of course they do. But right now, people of color are being discriminated against. People of color are being oppressed. So why? Why is that happening? This system in this country is set up by white people. It is a white dominant culture. That's what we're going to dig into today. It is a white dominant culture. If you don't think that it is, and you're white, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And I need you to take a second and put aside that anger that might be bubbling up in you, put aside that bias, and look around you. Everybody on TV is white. Just about. Sure, okay, you've got a couple characters that aren't. Okay. But the dominant culture is white culture on TV. The dominant culture in media, the dominant culture in schools, the dominant culture everywhere is white. So when you have a system that's set up as a white culture, anybody who's not white is oppressed because they're not seeing themselves represented. Okay? So it is like a born-in systemic racism. Even if we don't think we're racist, if you're saying all lives matter, or if you're saying, well, I've got a black friend, if you're saying this is not a white culture, I'm not privileged, I'm so sorry, and I'm really not trying to be rude, but you are part of the problem right now. So let's fix it. I can help, I promise. So just sit down, take some notes if you want to. We're going to kind of attack the systemic racism beliefs that we might have. You may not, if you're one of those people that's maybe getting angry right now hearing what I'm saying, I want you to know that if you don't realize what you're saying is offensive or racist, it's probably not your fault. If you think you're doing the best that you can, you are, because that's what you know. But now it's time to learn. Okay? So, how can privilege affect us? What is white privilege? Let's dig in. This is hard work, but we have to do it if we want to be better. White privilege is a set of privileges afforded to the dominant culture in the U.S., members of whom are often unaware they are even afforded privileges. I hear over and over again, I'm not privileged, I'm poor. I'm not privileged. I have debt. I have student loan debt. I have this, I have that. We're not saying, nobody's trying to say that you are rich or that you don't have troubles. That's not the case. But you are privileged in the fact that you are the dominant culture. So in the United States, this is the second bullet here, dominant cultures include Northern and Western European descent and people whose sexuality is perceived as straight and men. So I have all my references here on the PowerPoint. I can give you guys that later if you need it. Examples of white privilege. I'm just going to read these to you. In a very heated classroom discussion of diversity, several white male students complained bitterly. It has gotten to a point where there's no place we can just be ourselves and not have to watch what we say or do all the time. The rest of the class, women and ethnic minorities, responded in unison. Hey, welcome to the world. The rest of us have been doing that kind of self-monitoring our whole lives. White males only comprise 40% of the workforce, yet hold 80% of management positions. 2 examples of white privilege. Statements from privileged individuals. I can arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area in which I can afford and in which I would want to live. I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. I am never asked to speak for all the members in my racial group. I can easily buy posters, toys, etc., featuring people of my race. If a traffic cop pulls me over, or if the IRS audits my tax return, I can be sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. I can be pretty sure that if I ask to speak to the person in charge, I will be facing a person of my own race. I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily and physical protection. Whether I use checks, credit cards, or cash, I can count on my skin color not to work against the appearance of financial credibility. So those are all statements that someone who is privileged in this culture can say. Someone who is not, someone who is oppressed, Can't say these things. This is the book that a lot of this is pulled from. It's called Cultural Competence. I apologize, this is backwards for you probably. By Jean Moulet. She's wonderful. This book is wonderful. It's in my references that I will show you. So, am I privileged? Are you privileged? What do you think? I'm not smiling because I'm trying to be funny. I'm just, do you think you are? So let's see if I can make this happen. No, it didn't work. I have the link copied. Of course, it didn't copy correctly. Ha! Hang on, let me see if I can do it on here. Because it's really hard to click. Let me do this. Because I would love for you guys to take this quiz. We're going to do the work. Let's do the work, huh? Okay. There we go. There you go. Okay, so now let's go back to get my PowerPoint back up, get my Zoom back up. I'm not really on Zoom, I'm just using it for the camera. Okay, so this is a quiz you can take to see, am I privileged? And again, privilege doesn't mean that you've had a cakewalk. Privilege doesn't mean you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Privilege just means that you have privilege that people of color do not have. So, take a minute, do the quiz. We're having class. Class is in session. Take the quiz and post in the comments. Let's see. Let's see if you think you are. This is hard. This is hard to look at it. It's hard to share. It's hard to face these things and realize, oh my gosh, this is me. And this is all part, trust me, this is all part of learning how to become an ally for people of color. Knowing your own privilege is step one. Okay, so I'm going to keep talking. You guys can do that. You can post in the comments if you want to. I would love to see some comments on there. We can have a discussion. We're going to dig a little deeper. You ready? This part's a little hard. Okay, there are identified by researchers 7 different types of racial attitudes that white people typically have. And again, not trying to single out white people, but because we are the dominant culture in the US, this has been studied to see what the different attitudes are. So it will be interesting to look at this and figure out where you fall in it, because it will help you see, like, how much further do I need to go to understand all of this, to understand how to be a better ally, to understand how to be a better friend to my person of color best friend or husband or wife or whatever. So knowing what's going on, knowing yourself, is step one of figuring out how to be a better friend and how to be a better ally. So 7 types of white racial attitudes. All right, there's unachieved and achieved. So this is unachieved and avoidant. So here's an example of an unachieved avoidant white attitude towards racism. Minority issues aren't all that important to me. We just don't get involved in that sort of thing. I really am not interested in thinking about those things. So just totally avoidant, just like, nope. I'm going to put my blinders on. This is fine. I'm going to stay in my bubble. So that's unachieved avoidant. Unachieved dependent. My thinking about minorities is mainly influenced by my friends, husband, family, etc. So you could say I mainly learned about minorities from them. I am going to say right now, this was me. I can do this. This works, right? Because I'm sharing my screen, so I can be like, this was me forever. My dad, my grandpa, just growing up, like, they were the, well, we have black friends. We're not racist, but, and it's what I knew. And until I looked into it, and until I read books, and until I started talking to people, I was one of the All Lives Matters people too. This was me. So, unachieved dissonance. I used to feel I knew what I thought when I thought about minorities, but now my feelings are really mixed. I'm having to change my thinking. I'm not sure, so I'm trying to find some answers to questions I have about minorities. And again, this is all from this book. So this is where a lot of you might be if you're watching and you want to be better. If you're just not sure what to do, but you know something's not right. You know you can do something more, but you're not sure where to start. You want those answers to those questions. Why do I keep getting yelled at when I'm trying to be sensitive to what's going on? Why am I saying the wrong thing? Why are people unfriending me for my, whatever, my All Lives Matter hashtag? You might be here. And if you're here, I'm glad you're watching. Even if you're the other two, I'm glad you're watching. I'm just glad you're here because you're trying to make this world a better place. So that's amazing, and you should be proud of yourself. All right, now we're into the achieved. Achieved, dominative. The truth about minorities is that they're kind of dumb. Their customs are crude, and they are pretty backward compared to what whites have accomplished. Besides that, I guess they're sort of lazy. I guess they just aren't up to what whites are. I wouldn't want a family member or even a close friend of mine to have a relationship with a minority. You may have to work near them, but you don't have to live close to one. So, that's not nice. The achieved part is indicating that that's pretty set. It's like a fixed mindset, unachieved versus achieved. So, this is somebody who is not wanting to change and somebody who's already made up their mind that they just don't like non-white people. Achieved, conflicted. There should be equal chances to better yourself for everyone, but minorities are way too demanding. The media are always finding something they say is unfair and making a big deal out of it. And the government is always coming up with some kind of program that lets them get more than they deserve. We shouldn't discriminate against minorities, but tilting things in their favor just isn't fair. White ethnic groups didn't get a lot of government help, and the minorities of today shouldn't expect it either. Okay. Achieved, integrative. Integration is a desirable goal for our society, and it could significantly improve problems relating to prejudice and discrimination if people would keep an open mind and allow it to work. Race and culture is not a factor when I choose my personal friends. I'm comfortable around minority people, and I don't mind being one of a few whites in a group. In fact, I wouldn't mind living next to minority people if their social class were similar to mine. I think we need racial harmony for democracy to be able to function. I'm going to circle back to these. We're just going through them right now. Achieved, reactive. Our society is quite racist. It really is difficult for minority people to get a fair deal. There may be some tokenism, but businesses won't put minority in the top positions. Actually, qualified minority people should be given preference at all levels of education and employment to make up for the effects of past discrimination. But they don't have enough power to influence the government, even though it's the government's responsibility to help minority people. It's enough sometimes to make you feel guilty about being white. Okay, so those are the 7 types. So, can you identify which racial attitude you or someone you know personally has? Discuss your findings in the comments. Be prepared to discuss with the whole class. Let's go back. So, this is not how you become an ally. This is not how you become an ally. This is not how you become an ally. So if you're somewhere in here, that's okay. If you want to be better, you can be better. To be better, we have to really, really look at what's going on with the white privilege piece and really, really look at what people of color are experiencing and then how to move forward and not be against the movement. Okay? So, in my opinion, I think this is probably the closest to where we all should be. But I still don't like that there's that line of like minority and non-minority, and but that's, I'm kind of I want everything to be totally harmonious and not have an issue at all, but that probably won't happen for another couple hundred years. So, think about these. Figure out which one you are. I'm seeing some comments. Okay. I'm looking back. Okay. So, now let's dig in to dominant versus minority. So there are differences in these major cultural groups in the US. Understanding them will help you to understand what people of color are going through, why there are riots, why they are angry, why everybody is angry that is paying attention to this injustice in the world. On a side note, the George Floyd killing, I feel like this movement should have happened a long time ago with people being, how do I want to say this? With people being this upset about it, I feel like this, I wish this would have happened years ago. Like with Philando Castile. I think I'm saying his name right. Like it should have happened then. But I think right now is just a perfect storm. And I really hate that people have to keep dying for other people to notice that there is an issue in this country. But I'm glad that people are paying attention. So we're here and we can really make a difference. And I'll talk about that more at the end too. So let's talk about dominant versus minority. So dominant culture in the United States, just to recap, the dominant cultures include people of Northern and Western European descent, people whose sexuality is perceived as straight and men. So it's kind of, there's probably a Venn diagram somewhere there that would show all of that. In the US, it can be called white privilege. And it's named for the dominant culture's privileges afforded to them since their culture created most of the institutions and constructs we see in modern America. Minority cultures. Minority culture is defined as any culture outside of the dominant culture. In the United States, by and large, the dominant culture is white, and minority cultures considered to be every other group besides white people who have a history of oppression. And I think, do I have the other book? Oh yeah, the other book that I'm referencing is this one. So these are all geared towards teaching, but they're fantastic books as well. The blue one. This is not necessarily true for every area of the United States, and this is important, especially in Hawaii, where decades of historically minority, immigrant, and indigenous culture clashed against Eurocentric invasion to become a Japanese American dominant society. So my husband and I have argued several times about white culture white privilege. And he would say there is no white privilege. What he meant, because we had it out, because I was like, yes, there is. Because I was studying this at the time. I was like, yes, there is. He was referencing Hawaii. He's like, white culture is not the primary in Hawaii. So when we say white privilege, understand that that is the U.S. The U.S., white people have privilege because we are the dominant culture. But in Hawaii, it's the Japanese Americans. They are the dominant culture. So they have the privileges afforded to them, whereas people of other cultures are minorities and then they are oppressed. So it's, and I have to be clear about this because I don't want anybody watching to think that I'm like against white people. Hello? Like, I don't like the way a lot of us act sometimes with all this stuff, but like it's really important to point out that it's not that white people are bad. It's not that white people have done anything really wrong right now. I shouldn't say that as a blanket statement, but the people watching, I'm sure, haven't. So it's really important to point that out, that we're talking about the dominant culture that then society is built around, right? And if you're not from that dominant culture, you're on the outskirts and you're seen as an outsider. Whether the people in the dominant culture want you to or not, that's just the example that we have in front of us. Does that make sense? So it's something really important to understand, that I'm not sitting here saying white people are inherently evil or white people are the whole problem. That's not what I mean. But we have a responsibility as white people in this country to stand up for what's right and to stand up to help people who are on the outskirts and being literally killed. So back to my points here. See, squirrel brain. Purple point right there. Minority cultures are also called people of color by Moulet, this one. And these terms will be used interchangeably. So you've heard me say both. What does it feel like to be in the minority? Let's dive into this a little bit. So I believe I read this to you already, this little quote. In a very heated classroom discussion of diversity, several white male students complained bitterly. It has gotten to a point where there's no place we can just be ourselves and not have to watch what we do and say all the time. The rest of the class, women and ethnic minorities, responded in unison. Hey, welcome to the world. The rest of us have been doing that kind of self-monitoring all of our lives. When I made this presentation, it was a 4-hour presentation. So this was like part 3. So it's circling back. It's called a spiraling curriculum. So reminds you of it. So yeah, you just heard it, but now you're hearing it again. All right, now this checklist up here, I can put in the comments later. It's kind of the same thing as the quiz, but a little bit different format. I'm pretty sure. I haven't looked at it today. Okay, so here's an example. I'll read this in a second. This is from the Moulet book, Jean Moulet. This is a great example, her hair story, but the better one is her Band-Aid story that I didn't put in this PowerPoint. What color are Band-Aids? And if you have dark skin, it doesn't match. That is the quintessential example of dominant culture. So, all right, let me read this to you. Jean Moulet's hair story. A black woman, Jean is excited to get her hair done for a wedding she was attending the next day. She laboriously took out her braids before heading to the salon, an hour-long process. Arriving at the salon, she is turned away due to a scheduling error. The appointment was for the following Friday. Dejectedly, she walked through the downtown area of Salem, Oregon, where she lived, looking for a salon who could braid her hair, a 3-hour process that requires skill. Every salon she tried didn't know how to do black hair. She ended up at a beauty school, and her hair was washed and eventually unskillfully combed out by a student and her teacher. With no knowledge on how to braid, they parted her hair for her, and she went home to braid it herself. So I can see both sides of reactions on this. I can see the people being like, oh, I totally get that. That's awful. And then I can see the people being like, well, that's her fault. She should have found a salon. The point of the story is not that. The point of the story is that in a dominant culture of white people, somebody who's on the outskirts, like Jean Moulet, a black woman, can't go and find what she needs. It's just not readily available. How must that feel? Could you imagine? If you're a white person, you're sitting here watching this as I'm talking, think about it. What if there was something that you always got? Maybe not your, like a hair, appointment, but what's something you always go to buy? And then all of a sudden, you can't go buy it because most of the people in the world just don't use that product. How would that feel? Awful, right? That's what oppression, and that's a very poor example, but that is what being on the outskirts feels like, which we can't understand, and we can't pretend to understand. We can try to empathize, but we can never truly understand. All right, here's another example. Korean students and the red pen. I love this example because when I first read this, I was like, whoa, it's things you don't think about. Mrs. Guzman is one of the best English teachers in the school. She spends every weekend reading her immigrant students' compositions and making careful remarks in red ink. To soften her criticisms, she says something positive before writing suggestions for improvement, using the students' names to make the comments more personable. Jaylee, these are fine ideas. These red-inked notes send shockwaves through the families of her Korean students, but Mrs. Guzman is unaware of this until the principal calls her into his office. She is told that Koreans, particularly those who are Buddhists, only write a person's name in red at the time of death or at the anniversary of a death. Therefore, to see names of their children in red terrified the Korean parents. So the point of that story is to just show you there's different cultural ideas and different cultural beliefs that we are unaware of. Did you know that before I read that to you? Because I didn't know that before I read that in the book. And when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh. And it just opened up my mind to all these other things that I must be completely unaware of. We walk through life thinking we know it all, when in reality, we don't know that much at all. We know what's in our own head and we see it through our own lens. So this whole exercise today is getting you away from that and getting you outside of this perspective that you have right here. Post a comment for the following question. When have you felt in the minority or alienated based on your culture? It's getting hard, guys. Dig in, do this work. This is hard. When have you felt alienated based on your culture? When did you feel like you were on the outskirts? Does it happen every day? Has it happened often? If you were a person of color, it would happen every day. Probably. So give an example in the comments and be prepared to discuss if you drop a comment. No hate is tolerated here. Don't say anything nasty. Just share some experiences. I'll share one of mine since nobody's commenting yet. I'll share one of mine. Honestly, the only time I can ever remember feeling alienated is when I was in school. And oh, wait, I've got a better one. I've got a way better one. When I was in the minority, I was asked to, in college, I was a singer songwriter. I played guitar and I sang on stage. I started out doing like open mic nights and I started doing the bar scene. I never got super into it, but I did a talent show and I won. It was in 2005 or 2006. They called it EIU Idol. I went to Eastern Illinois University and I won. Like, I was shocked when they called my name that I won. It was out of like 10 people, and I think I did 2 original songs. Doesn't matter. Sorry, memory lane, back to the point. And because of that, I got a lot of shows that people wanted me to do and different things for the university. So, one thing that I did was it was like a Toys for Tots fundraiser, and I didn't know anything about it. But I was like, oh, cool, it's Christmas time, Toys for Tots. Like, I can do Santa Baby on acoustic guitar. That'll be super cool. Like, I did, like, I think 3 or 4 songs. And I didn't know, and it didn't matter. But I walked in, and it was the Black Student Coalition, or I'm not sure exactly what it was called, but it was a Black student organization. And I walked in, this, like, pasty white girl with a black acoustic electric guitar, about half the size of me. And I was like, hi. And they just looked at me like, hi. And it was just this awkward moment of like, I could almost feel like, why did we invite a white girl to the party? And then me being like, why did they invite me to the party? And it was, I think, just because of the time, the year, things were still very different than they are now, where it was very, I don't want to say segregated, but it was very, like cultures kind of stuck together as they do today. But I very much felt in the minority. And I won't say I felt discriminated against. Like, it ended up being great. I went and sang my songs and made a couple new friends, and it was really cool. But it was just that first initial moment of like, oh. And they were like, oh. Everybody in the room was like, what's happening? So that was very bizarre. And even now, like, as I'm speaking about it, I'm feeling uncomfortable and I feel like I'm saying the wrong things. And it's important to point out that that it's okay to not know what to say, and it's okay to ask questions, and like, what would have been the right thing for me to say telling that story. Did I do it right? I'm not sure if I did, but that was my recollection, and that's just how I'm telling it. So if you have some comments, let's share. And okay, still nobody is. That's fine. You can do it later, or just don't do it at all. But do think about it. Okay, so what is culture? A series of definitions. Now, we're getting ready to pull it all together, I promise, guys. So culture is the way of life, habits, norms, values, customs, language, family patterns, traditional ideas, etc., as experienced and learned by particular groups and passed down through the generations. That is culture. Okay? That's my symbol for culture, I guess. You're in a bubble of culture. Ethnocentrism. Here's our first vocab word for the day. The act of using only the values and standards of one's own values and culture to judge another culture. Often, we judge others' cultures through the lens of our own. To be truly culturally sensitive, we must first be ethno-relative. Ethno-relativism is the ability to accept that the diverse values, norms, mores, etc., represent cultural nuances and not universal realities. Accepting and acknowledging that there are different ways of viewing the world, understanding cultures and accepting particular behaviors within a cultural rather than a universal context. So let's break it down. Instead of being like, I go to church, I worship God, I celebrate Christmas, I put up Christmas lights, I make these special cookies that my grandma made, and we always have ham for Christmas. That's Christmas. And if you don't do it like that, you're wrong. That's ethnocentrism. Because people that do that kind of thinking, like, these are my things we do for Christmas, and if you don't do it, you're wrong, you're completely leaving out so much of the world. And I see this time and time again, especially with Christmas And yeah, we're going to unpack this one because this whole Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays thing's got to stop too. That's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother layer of society here. But stick with me and listen to this, because when you say we have to say Merry Christmas, what you're doing is ethnocentrism, or rather, it's religious centrism. You are saying everybody has to be Christian, and if you're not Christian, you're wrong. So think about that. So when we say Happy Holidays, it's because there's people out there that celebrate Kwanzaa and celebrate Hanukkah and celebrate other things I'm not even aware of because I'm not a history person or a buff on these things, different holidays of the world. But the same thing goes for ethnocentrism when it comes to our ethnic and our cultural ideas. You cannot be ethnocentric and be accepting of people around you that are unlike you. You need to be ethno-relative and accept that there are diverse and so many values and norms different than your own. It's not about you. It's about everybody. Everybody is different, and that's part of what makes this world so beautiful. So remember, when you start doing this, well, they're not like me. They don't do what I do. I don't like them. Stop it. If you want to be better, stop it. And look at it from a point of view that is accepting of others and others' cultures. Okay? Okay. 5 major types. According to Moulet, she's my favorite, there are 5 major types of cultures present in the United States. Understanding and knowing possible attitudes and perceptions can make each of you a better ally. White Europeans. White Europeans' cultural outlook. Nature and the environment. We prefer mastery over environment. We usually do not live in harmony with nature, skyscrapers, concrete, etc. We view humans as superior in nature, physical environment, and that they are entitled to manipulate it at their will. Time orientation. Tend to plan towards the future, planning, producing, controlling. Being efficient with time is seen as a positive attribute. To be on time is to be late, that kind of thing. With people relations, we usually have an individual social focus, referring to actions that actualize oneself, taught to compete, seek individual success, and feel pride in achievements or make achievements public knowledge. My boy got a 4.0 in his doctorate program. Look how great he is. I bought him a car. Work and activity. White Europeans are doing oriented. They are either initiating activity or they are in pursuit of a goal. Now, this is a generalization. Not everybody who is considered a white European will be this way, but this is the vast majority, right? Human nature. Good and bad resides within the individual, not the group. Good and bad are often at odds with one another. The devil on one shoulder, the angel on the other. Okay, so you're probably reading that and be like, well, yeah, that's what everybody thinks, right? That's 1 of 5. Asian Americans. Asian Americans' cultural outlook. Nature and the environment. Living in harmony with nature, respecting and coexisting with nature. To destroy a fellow creature is to destroy a part of oneself. Time orientation for Asian Americans' culture. Past-present oriented. History is a living entity. Ancestors and past events are felt to be alive and impacting present reality. The past flows imperceptibly into and defines the present. They are on, and this is from the book written by a black woman, so please, these are not my words, okay? This is politically correct. They are on colored people's time, CP, a looser sense of time and punctuality than European Americans. People relations, collateral behavior, doing things to contribute to the survival and betterment of family and community. It is considered impolite to say no or to refuse to comply with a superior. Work and activity, also doing oriented, just like white Europeans. They are either initiating activity or they are in pursuit of a goal. And with human nature, the view is inherent, that inherent nature is good. There is no good versus evil. It's just good. Okay. I love you too, Nikki. I just read your comment. All right, Native Americans. So, Native Americans' cultural outlook. Nature and the environment. Living in harmony with nature, respecting and coexisting with nature. To destroy a fellow creature is to destroy a part of oneself. Also, for time orientation on colored people's time, a looser sense of time and punctuality than European Americans. Present oriented, focus of life is on the here and now. There isn't a past, there isn't a present coming into it. It's just people relations, collateral behavior, doing things to contribute to the survival and betterment of family and community. They place high value on cooperation and strive to suppress individual accomplishment and boasting. Brevity of speech is, oh, there's a typo. Brevity of speech is highly valued. Work and activity, being and becoming, passive, process-oriented, focused on the here and now. Wait for the world to show them opportunities for activity, then work rather than seeking work. Human nature, again, the view of inherent nature of people is good. African Americans. African Americans' cultural outlook. Nature and the environment. Living in harmony with nature, respecting and coexisting with nature. To destroy a fellow creature is destroy a part of oneself. Gosh, this is all sounding the same except for the white Europeans, isn't it? On colored people's time, a looser sense of time and punctuality than European Americans. Present-oriented, focus of life is on the here and now, not the future, not the past. People relations, collateral behavior, again, doing things to contribute to the survival and betterment of family and community. Ability to rap as an art form. Work and activity, doing oriented, they are neither initiating activity or they are in pursuit of a goal. Human nature, good and bad resides within the community, not the individual. If it benefits the community, it is laudable. So it's not like, you got a 4.0, I'm buying you a car. It is more, I can't think of an example. It's not that one. How would that work? Good and bad resides within the community, not the individual. If it benefits the community, it's laudable. So I guess, like, if you went and became a superstar, you went and became a platinum selling artist, and then you came back and you bought the local YMCA and renovated it, I think that would fit there. Oh, I just saw Emily's comment. I do have the PowerPoint. I can make it a Google Doc. Absolutely, because it has all the references at the end and stuff. I was thinking about doing that. All right, Latino Americans. Don't get tired on me here. I can almost feel it. Like, oh, she's still going. We're in class, kids. Come on. You're learning about different cultures. You want to be better? This is how you get better. Latin Americans' cultural outlook. Nature and the environment. Living in harmony with nature, respecting and coexisting with nature. To destroy a fellow creature is to destroy a part of oneself. Time orientation, past present oriented. History is a living entity. Ancestors and past events are felt to be alive and impacting present reality. First thing that comes to mind for me with this is the movie Coco. That's a really good way to think about this. The past flows imperceptibly into and defines the present. Again, like Diez del Muerte. Am I saying that right? I don't speak Spanish. I'm sorry. Time orientation, on colored people's time, a looser sense of time and punctuality than European Americans. People relations, again, collateral behavior, doing things to contribute to the survival and betterment of family and community. Place high value on cooperation and strive to suppress individual accomplishment and boasting. Now that's a big one. Place high value on cooperation and not so much on individual accomplishment and boasting. And the same thing was on African Americans' culture outlook. So another example I'm thinking of right now is breaking out of the family group or the community group to go to college. When people from these cultures do that, they're often ostracized. This is probably why, right? Like it's, and again, these are like the, what do I want to say? The base cultural groups, right? Like people who have been living in America for a while, and like this is more like in a Latin country, I think. Like it's maybe not so much like people who have been in the American culture for a while. I don't know how true this would be. This is more like the old country kind of ideas. Maybe not always. I'm not an expert. I just read the book and I'm just sharing with you what I know. But that very much makes sense to me that there would be that kind of ostracizing. I can't even talk. If you did break out from the group and go to college and like get a degree to do something more, they might try to pull you back down because that happens a lot to kids, all over the place. I know it happens to white kids too, depending on the culture of their family. All right, work and activity. Being and becoming, passive, process-oriented, focused on the here and now. Wait for the world to show them opportunities for activity, then work rather than seeking work. And human nature, they view inherent nature as good. So you can probably kind of tell I'm getting uncomfortable right now because I'm not sure if I'm saying things right. So if you're watching and I'm saying things wrong, please tell me. I'm a student too. I'm, like I said in my description, I am not an expert. I'm just sharing this knowledge with you, and I want to be better too. So doing the best I can, and please educate me if I need to be educated. So what is your culture? Take 5 minutes and write down, what cultural group do you identify with? How do you know you identify with that group based on the cultural facets, not just, well, I'm an Asian? Identify a person you know in your life, you can be close with them or not, who is from a different culture than yourself. How do you know they identify with the group? Based on the cultural facets, not because they are Indian. So think back to those examples and realize, again, there's 5 different types. The dominant culture is one of the 5. And if you noticed, the last 4 were pretty darn similar. It's the what was it? White Europeans, I think was the first group, is what it was called. White Europeans. That was the group that was like, we value time and we want you to be punctual and we want to build everything into a massive skyscraper and make everything more industrious and to hell with the little guy and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That is all white culture. That's all that idea. And it's one of 5 types in the world. These are the 5 broad groups that researchers have figured out with, is it anthropology? Study of people? So share in your comments, in the comments section, what you identify with. All right, here's the conclusion. How do we do better? How do we take a look at all these things that make us uncomfortable? All these things that make us feel vulnerable and fragile and like we're doing something wrong. How do we take all of this and be better? And I don't really have a great answer for you, but Black Lives Matter is a good one, a good place to start. Instead of saying all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, because right now Black people are under attack, quite literally, and I hate it. Running down the street on a run and gets attacked, holding a book in broad daylight and gets shot, in his car, pulled over, gets shot, foot to the neck on the pavement for 10 minutes for writing a check. You don't see that happening to white people, guys. It isn't. It just isn't. And it's because of the way that our culture is set up. We aren't afraid of that happening to us if we have this skin color. If you're watching this and you're white, you're not. Could a white person do bad things? Yeah. Like, let's talk for a second about all the frickin' school shootings that have been done by white people, white men. So yeah, of course white people do things that are bad and then they get shot by cops. But we're talking about groups of people who are being shot, killed, and detained for no reason. No reason. And it's because of the white culture that's set up. So I think the important part to take away from this, because some of you might be getting defensive hearing me say this, just to recap, I'm not saying white people are bad. I'm not saying white culture is bad. I love my culture. Like, a lot of people kind of poke fun at white culture, like you don't really have a culture, you stole from other people's cultures. Maybe, but I really like my traditions. I really like the way I celebrate holidays. It is home to me. It is my family and my life and my things that I hold to be like my normal things. That's my culture. I love it. But the problem that we are having is that that culture is the dominant culture. And as such, people in the dominant culture are the only ones who have the power to change anything. Be an ally. Speak up when you hear someone using a microaggression or racially driven speech. It will be uncomfortable and you're going to ruffle feathers, but the hate has to stop. What is a microaggression? Microaggression is two teenagers, a black girl and a white girl. They're each holding a baby. What do you assume about the white girl holding the baby? What do you assume about the black girl holding the baby? Let's say they're 15. What do you assume about the black girl holding the baby? I will answer for you what most of us probably think. The white girl's babysitting, or that's her little sister. The black girl, that's her baby. That's a microaggression. That is assuming, based on color, you know something about that person's life. A microaggression is a small assumption that paints somebody into a stereotype that is hurtful and wrong. I have millions more examples of microaggressions, but that's the best one that I've seen to kind of illustrate quickly what that means. So if you see somebody doing that, if you see somebody profiling or using microaggressions, I remember in high school, I'm guilty of microaggressions. I worked at, story time, I worked at a balloon shop in Springfield, and a kid I went to school with who was black came in, and out of my mouth popped, "What are you doing on this side of town?" Like, looking back on that, and I'm not making excuses for myself. I should have known better. I should have been taught better. That's how I was raised. That's what I heard. That's what was in my house. Black people live on that side of town. White people live on my side of town. So he walked in and his face fell when I said it, and I knew it was wrong. I knew I said something wrong, but I didn't realize it before I said it. And even after his face fell and he looked hurt, I still was like, "Well, what? You don't live on this side of town." He totally did. Like, his dad was a doctor. That was a microaggression. So if you see something like that, you have to speak up. You have to tell that person doing that microaggression, it is your responsibility. If you want to make this world better, you have to tell that person, "Hey man, that's really not cool. You don't know where that person lives." Or, "Hey man, why do you think that that's her baby? Why couldn't she be babysitting?" We have to start calling people out. That's how you become an ally. You have to call it out for what it is and not be rude about it, but educate people. And they're going to fight back because it's going to be this conversation of, "Well, I'm not doing anything wrong." I say that all the time. Probably is her baby. Everybody's got that uncle, everybody's got that aunt or that grandpa or whoever that is just, they spew stuff that's horrible and things that they shouldn't say about different cultural groups and things. You have to pick your battles because some people just can't be brought back from a lifetime of this. But we have to start speaking up. And that's what inspired me to do this today, because I had 5 different conversations with 5 different people who said all lives matter last night. And I called them out because I'm mad. I'm over it. We have to do better. Do all lives matter? Yes, they do. Right now, that is not what we're saying, though, because right now, Black lives matter, because Black lives are being oppressed. Black lives are being ended. Speak up, say something, and educate. So, point number 2, speak out and educate to those who just aren't getting it. Do so kindly. We want to teach. Could they go and pick up a book? Yes. But if they are living in a bubble of this, I'll call it this way, white fragility, so fragile in your white existence that you're threatened by hearing that you might have white privilege, that kind of attitude's very, very hard to break out of. And people are defensive about it. People don't want to learn. People think they're doing the right thing, and then they get frustrated, throw their hands up in the air and go, well, what am I supposed to do? So tell them. Or be like, hey man, go pick up a book if you really want to do better. Because it is our responsibility. It does fall to us. No, we were not the people who enslaved Black people 200, 300 years ago. We were not. Our ancestors were. But now we live in a society that is white dominant. And nothing can change until we start speaking up and calling other white people out on their bullshit. Sorry if there's kids watching. They may not even know that it's bullshit. That's the hard part. They will be defensive. You may ruffle feathers. Just take a second and help them and try. Remember, and I wrote this down somewhere, it takes a few times of hearing something for things to catch on. If you're teaching somebody something, they do not get it the first time. I have a master's degree in higher education. I have an elementary education degree for my bachelor's. I've studied education for over 10 years. I've taught several of those years. And I can tell you, the way our brains work, you don't get it the first time. You have to do it. You have to hear it. You have to see it. You have to practice it. You have to see it being modeled for you to be able to grasp something. So you, wanting to do better, see a microaggression. You can't just go up and badger the person about it. That was wrong and rude and how awful of you. You won't get anywhere. All that's going to do is raise defenses, and they're just going to not listen to you. Speak kindly and teach. And just remember that I'm sitting here right now in the year 2020, and in the year 1999, I asked the Black kid, why are you on my side of town? People can change with education. You just have to be nice and give them a chance. So, number 3 here, use your white privilege to this movement's advantage. If anything is going to change for people of color, it literally has to start with the dominant culture. We have a responsibility to our friends, to our neighbors. Let's use it wisely. And lastly, oh, look at that. I'm almost at an hour. I didn't even time it. Damn, I'm good. Don't be afraid. This isn't about you. This is the hard part to wrap your head around when it comes to being a leader and standing up for something that you know is right. It's not about you. What do I mean by that? Fear of speaking up often stems from not wanting to be annoying or wanting to start a fight. A lot of times we stay quiet because we are afraid of people judging us, or we are afraid of the reactions we're going to get out of people. I'm a health and wellness coach. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you know you've seen me in my sports bra right back here. This is my home gym right here, and I used to be terrified to share it. I've taken a lot of leadership classes, and as a wellness coach, I'm helping people with their health, right? I can't do that unless I model what I'm preaching, and doing that the right way takes me completely out of the equation. That picture of me in my sports bra is not about me. That picture of me in my sports bra is to motivate and to inspire others. Look at me and how I'm working out and the results that I'm getting. When I took myself out of that equation and I stopped worrying about what people were going to say about me, and I stopped worrying about people who might be offended by my midriff, because really if they're offended by it, they can just keep scrolling, I was able to help change so many lives. The same goes for this. This is not about us. When you see somebody acting the way that they're acting, with a microaggression or being, racially profiling or whatever, you have to speak up, and it's not about you. Take your ego out of it. Don't worry about how they're going to react. Unless you're afraid it's going to end in violence, that's a whole nother conversation. So my next point there with a little winky face. Tough love time. Take your ego out of it. Standing up for someone is not about you, so do not worry about what they're going to say to you or about you. Gotta stand up for what's right. Okay, the one with the little dude. Be better, learn, do better. And you don't have to fight to help. You can just teach. Give resources, speak kindly, do your part. All right, the one with the tongue. Speak respectfully. Not everyone will get it, but in time they might. Don't get discouraged. It takes several times of hearing or learning something for it to really, really sink in. Little postage stamp. There we go. Lead with kindness, compassion, and love. And the little halo. Remember, speak up for something you believe in, even if you stand alone. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you guys got something out of it. Share the shit out of this. If you think there's somebody that needs to hear it, please share it. I will post my, in the comments, I'll post a few things. I'll do the links that I couldn't copy. There was another quiz. And then I'll put, there is a Google form link I can put up that's like a quiz for yourself if you want to quiz yourself on today that I made for the class. And then I can also post this PowerPoint. I have no issues doing that. And if anybody, has questions, reach out. In the Google form that I'll post with this PowerPoint, I'll put all my references in. Actually, I'll just put the paper in there too. Excuse me, my term paper, it was my master's thesis. I can put that up there. It's got like all of the references, lots of good information. So that's why you're here, is for information resources. So, so thank you for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. We had a lot of viewers today and a lot of comments. So thank you so much. And I am very, very inspired and hopeful that so many of you are here wanting to be better and do better. Thanks, guys.